It started with silence, a heavy, unnatural stillness that hung in the air like the last deep breath before a storm. The galaxy had known peace for generations, an era built upon treaties and alliances between species who claimed to have evolved past violence. It was a time of reason, diplomacy, and sterile words spoken in sprawling council chambers. But when the danger came swift and merciless, it tore through the fabric of that delicate peace like a predator shredding its prey. And no one had an answer. No one knew how to fight back. No one, except for the humans. Humans had always been a strange species, whispered about in low, careful tones across the stars. Some races praised their ingenuity, others muttered warily of their reckless courage. To many, they were primitive, unpredictable, quick to anger, and quicker still to throw themselves into conflicts that could have been avoided. They were the species who had once waged wars on their own kind, built empires, and torn them down just as easily. The galaxy preferred to see them as a cautionary tale, a species that had too much fire in their veins. Yet for all that anger, that raw, untamed humanity, there were things in the dark that only humans were willing to face. When the invaders came, they didn't arrive with fanfare or grand announcements. There were no opportunities for negotiation or surrender. Ships fell from the sky, their massive frames blocking out suns and casting entire cities into shadow. The people of the galaxy watched in terror as the invaders' machines of cold steel and precision descended on their homes. The invaders were unlike anything they had ever seen. Silent, efficient, merciless. It didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, strong or weak. The machines did not discriminate. They destroyed everything in their path. Planets fell one after another, swallowed by fire and silence. The council sent envoys. They pleaded, reasoned, and offered their wealth, everything they had, to the invaders. But the machines answered only with destruction. The galaxy's greatest minds devised weapons, shields, and strategies, but the machines adapted faster than they could invent. For all their progress and enlightenment, the peaceful species had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. And so they fell. When the council convened for the last time, the halls were filled with despair. Worlds were burning, and their people cried out for salvation. Yet no one had answers. The surviving leaders argued and blamed one another, their voices trembling with the knowledge that it was already too late. That's when someone spoke the forbidden words, "We need the humans." The room fell silent. Eyes turned toward the speaker, wide with disbelief and dread. Call the humans, the same species that had been sidelined for their chaotic nature, their fiery temper, their refusal to conform to the council's ways, the humans who had once been labeled too angry to be trusted. But the galaxy had no other choice. They had tried everything else, and the machines were still coming. They needed someone who could fight back. Someone who would fight with the kind of ferocity the peaceful species had long abandoned. Reluctantly, the message was sent, a desperate plea broadcast across the stars. A plea for help. Days passed. Weeks. For a time, it seemed that even the humans would not come. Perhaps they, too, had fallen. Perhaps they had turned their backs on a galaxy that had cast them aside. But then, in the cold silence of space, a fleet appeared. It was not like the polished ships of the Council, sleek and pristine, symbols of diplomacy and progress. The human ships were battered and scarred, worn by battles fought long before this war. They looked like they had seen hell, and returned to tell the tale. And on every ship there were humans. Warriors, engineers, fighters, people who carried with them the unrelenting determination of a species that refused to be extinguished. The humans didn't waste time with introductions or formalities. They didn't ask for explanations or hesitate to assess the threat. The moment their boots hit alien soil, they were already moving. They set up defenses, rebuilt broken cities, and strategized with the precision of a species that had spent centuries learning to survive against impossible odds. And when the machines came again, the humans were ready. For the first time, the invaders met resistance. Not measured, calculated resistance, but fierce, unrelenting anger. The humans fought like no one else in the galaxy could. They charged headfirst into battles that others would flee, their weapons blazing and their voices echoing across the ruins of cities. They fought with a desperation that came from knowing what it meant to lose everything. They were unyielding, defiant, and terrifying to behold. Some of the other species watched in awe. Others watched in fear. To see humans fight was to witness something primal and raw, the kind of anger that could turn despair into victory. It was not beautiful. It was not graceful. It was chaos and fire, born from a place deep within the human spirit. And it worked. The machines began to falter. For the first time, they were pushed back. It wasn't easy. Every battle cost the humans dearly. They bled, they fell, and they mourned. But they did not stop. When a wall was broken, they rebuilt it. When a comrade fell, another stepped forward. Their anger, the very thing the galaxy had once shunned, became their greatest weapon. "The humans are crazy," some whispered, shaking their heads as they watched human soldiers charge into hopeless fights and somehow emerge victorious. "No," others replied, "the humans are angry." For the first time in their history, the peaceful species understood what anger truly was. It was not mindless rage or chaos. It was a refusal to accept defeat. It was a fire that burned in the hearts of the humans, driving them to fight even when the odds were against them. It was what made them stand between the invaders and the rest of the galaxy, fists clenched and eyes blazing with determination. As the battles raged on, the humans began to teach the others. They showed them how to hold a weapon, how to build fortifications, and how to stand their ground. Some species struggled, their hands trembling as they picked up guns for the first time. "We can't do this," they would say, their voices filled with fear. And the humans would look them in the eye and answer, "Yes, you can. You have to." Slowly, the galaxy began to fight back. Under the guidance of the humans, they learned to stand together. They learned that anger controlled, channeled anger could be the thing that saved them. It wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was about having the courage to fight when everything seemed hopeless. It was about refusing to let the darkness win. And yet, even as the tide of the war began to turn, the humans knew the fight was far from over. The machines were relentless, and the battles were growing fiercer with each passing day. But the humans did not falter. They stood at the front lines, their voices loud and their anger blazing like a beacon across the stars. They fought for the galaxy that had once rejected them, because that's what humans did. They fought. They endured. And they never, ever gave up. The others began to see the humans differently. They no longer whispered about their anger as something to fear, but as something to respect. It was the kind of anger that built hope where there was none. It was the kind of anger that turned the tide of a losing war. And so, the story of the humans spread across the stars. They were no longer the outcasts, the reckless warriors dismissed by the council. They were the ones who came when no one else would, the ones who faced the darkness and refused to look away, the ones who showed the galaxy what it truly meant to fight for survival. Because in the end, it was the so-called angry humans who came to the rescue, and the galaxy would never forget it. The humans' arrival had been a turning point, but it was far from the end. Across the galaxy, whispers spread like wildfire. Tales of battles fought and won, of humans pushing back against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. To the peaceful species, the humans were almost mythical, now legends born from the ashes of a war that no one else could fight. But beneath the growing reverence and hope, questions lingered. Who were these humans, really? What had made them this way? How could they keep fighting when everything seemed so hopeless? Those who had been lucky enough to meet the humans up close saw the truth. They were not perfect. They were not invincible. They were tired, scarred, and burdened by the weight of every decision they had made. Yet, there was a fire in them, a stubborn refusal to surrender. It was not something born of anger alone. It was something deeper, something carved into the very soul of humanity. When the council leaders finally gathered to speak with the human commanders, they were struck by how ordinary they seemed. The humans were not towering giants or fearsome monsters, as some had imagined. They were men and women, no different in appearance from other species, except for the fierce light in their eyes. They carried themselves like people who had seen too much and learned to live with it. There was something in their voices, too, a kind of quiet resolve that made every word carry weight. "You fought wars before," one council member said carefully, addressing a human commander. "Wars against your own kind." The commander nodded. He was a middle-aged man with a face weathered by years of hardship. "Yes, many wars. Some for survival, some for greed. We've made mistakes, but we've learned from them. Why do you fight now?" "For us?" another council member asked, her voice hesitant. The human looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Because we know what happens when you don't fight. Because we understand that sometimes you don't get a choice. You fight or you die." There was a weight to his words that silenced the room. The other species had spent so long living in peace that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. To claw your way out of the darkness, no matter the cost. For the humans, survival wasn't a right. It was something you earned day by day, fight by fight. As the war dragged on, stories of the humans spread further. Soldiers who had fought beside them shared tales of their bravery, how they never left anyone behind, how they would charge into impossible situations without hesitation. For every story of triumph, there was a story of loss. Humans were not unbreakable. They fell, just like everyone else. But what set them apart was their refusal to stay down. On a distant planet, ravaged by the machines, a young alien soldier watched as a group of humans rebuilt the walls of a destroyed outpost. The air was thick with smoke and ash, and the sounds of distant gunfire echoed through the ruins. The soldier couldn't understand it. How could these humans keep working, keep fighting, when it seemed like everything was already lost? "Why do you do this?" he finally asked, his voice filled with frustration. "The machines are too strong. We can't win." A human woman, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, paused to look at him. She was holding a welding torch, repairing a section of the wall that had been blown apart. "'Tis someone has to," she said simply. "If we don't, who will?" "But we're not like you," the soldier said. "We don't know how to fight like this." The woman's gaze softened, and she set down the torch. "No one is born knowing how to fight," she said. "You learn, you adapt, and you find something worth fighting for. That's what makes us strong." The alien soldier stared at her, trying to understand. To the humans, fighting wasn't just about weapons or tactics. It was about finding the strength to stand when everything around you was falling apart. It was about holding on to hope, no matter how small. The longer the war went on, the more the galaxy began to change. Under the humans' leadership, species that had never even held weapons began to train. Cities that had been abandoned were reclaimed, rebuilt, and defended. For the first time in generations, the galaxy learned what it meant to fight back. But even as victories were won, the darkness loomed larger. The machines were relentless, and for every battle won, there were more waiting on the horizon. The humans knew this better than anyone. The war was taking its toll on them too. Their faces grew more gaunt, their eyes heavier with each passing day. They were tired, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. In the quiet moments between battles, the humans shared stories of their own past. Around makeshift campfires on ruined worlds, they spoke of Earth of a blue planet with green forests and vast ocean. A place where humanity had fought countless wars, but also built great wonders. They spoke of the struggles that had shaped their species, of the mistakes they had made and the lessons they had learned. "You think we fight because we love it," one soldier said to an alien companion, his voice low and steady. "But we don't. We fight because we have to. Because we know what it's like to lose everything." The alien watched him quietly, the flickering light of the fire dancing across their faces. "What happens if we lose?" the alien asked softly. The human looked into the flames, his expression distant. "Then we fight harder." Those words became a mantra across the galaxy. Fight harder. No matter how impossible the odds seemed, no matter how many times they were knocked down, the humans showed everyone what it meant to keep going. They were the spark that lit a fire in the hearts of the other species, a fire that could not be extinguished. But the war was far from over. The machines were learning, adapting, just as the humans had warned. Each battle grew fiercer, and the victories became harder to win. On the edges of the galaxy, entire fleets were wiped out in the blink of an eye. Cities were razed, and entire planets fell silent. The humans knew that the worst was still to come. The machines were only getting stronger, and the galaxy's newfound unity would soon face its greatest test. In the darkness of space, the human fleet prepared for what lay ahead. Their ships were battered and scarred, but they were still flying. Their crews were exhausted, but they were still fighting. In their hearts, they carried the weight of every life they had saved and every life they had lost. They had become the galaxy's last hope, the only ones willing to stand between the machines and total annihilation. As they readied for the next battle, a message echoed across the stars, sent from a desperate world on the brink of destruction. It was a plea for help, like so many before it. And once again, the humans answered. "We're on our way," a human captain said, his voice steady as he stared out into the void. "Hold the line. We're coming." And so, the war raged on, the fires of humanity burning brighter than ever. They were angry. They were tired. But they would not stop. Not until the machines were gone, or until there was no one left to fight. The humans were everywhere now. On ruined planets, in the depths of space, in underground bunkers where survivors huddled together. Their voices carried over crackling comms, giving orders, providing hope, shouting warnings when the machines struck again. They had become the force that held the galaxy together, the glue that kept species from falling apart under the weight of fear and devastation. And still, the machines pressed on. Every encounter with the invaders grew worse. The machines were learning, changing tactics, adapting to the humans' methods. Where once they had been predictable, wave after wave of cold steel and calculated destruction, now they became something else. Smarter, faster, deadlier, and the humans knew they were running out of time. On the edges of the front lines, a massive machine fleet appeared without warning. Ships the size of cities emerged from the dark, blotting out the stars. They weren't just machines anymore. They were something more, as though the invaders had taken the lessons from every defeat and turned them into a new, monstrous form. Their weapons burned brighter, their attacks were relentless, and their sheer numbers overwhelmed defenses in a matter of hours. "They're pushing toward the core systems," came a panicked voice over the comms. "We can't hold them back. There's too many." The signal cut off in a burst of static. Another fleet gone. Another planet abandoned. The humans gritted their teeth, pulled their ships together, and prepared for the next stand. But the fear was growing. The machines had turned this war into a game of inevitability. For every small victory, the price was staggering. In one desperate moment, the human commanders called for a gathering. They brought the leaders of the surviving species to a war room deep inside an asteroid base, one of the last secure locations they had left. The room was filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes, their faces lined with exhaustion and uncertainty. Human officers stood among them, weapons slung over their shoulders, their uniforms torn and stained. The humans' calm was unnerving to the others. Even now, when the odds were at their worst, the humans refused to show fear. "They're preparing for something big," a human strategist explained, his voice steady as he gestured toward a massive hologram of the galaxy. Red lines swept across the map, marking the advance of the machine fleets. "This isn't just an invasion anymore. This is extermination. They're closing in, tightening the noose. If we don't stop them here at the core systems, there won't be anything left to fight for." One alien leader, his voice quaking, asked the question everyone was thinking. "How can we stop them? We've thrown everything we have at these machines. Every fleet, every weapon, and still they keep coming. You, humans, you fought harder than anyone, but even you must see that this is hopeless." A human officer stepped forward. She was young, her face streaked with soot and exhaustion, but her eyes burned with the same fire that had carried humanity this far. "If you're looking for guarantees, you won't get them," she said. Her voice was rough but steady. "We don't know if we can stop them, but we do know what happens if we don't try. So, the question isn't whether it's hopeless. The question is whether you're willing to fight, even when it is." The room fell silent. The humans weren't offering a miracle. They weren't promising a victory. They were offering a choice to fight, even with no assurance of survival. To stand when everything else had fallen. It was a choice the other species had never been forced to make before. For all their progress and enlightenment, they had never faced an enemy like this. They had never faced extinction. Finally, One of the alien leaders stood up, his voice steady. "Tell us what we need to do." And so, the final plan was set into motion. The humans would lead a counterattack, unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was reckless, desperate, and borderline impossible, exactly the kind of plan only humans could come up with. They would take the fight directly to the machines, targeting their central command structure deep within enemy territory. If they could strike at the heart of the invasion, they might disrupt the machines' coordination long enough to give the galaxy a chance. Word of the plan spread like wildfire, rallying those who had once thought the war lost. Ships that had been hiding in distant systems emerged from the shadows. Old weapons were dusted off, and entire planets mobilized. For the first time, the galaxy united under the humans' leadership, prepared to fight back as one. The humans didn't sugarcoat the odds. They knew most of them wouldn't make it back. But that didn't matter. The war had reached its breaking point. There was no time left for hesitation. Either they stopped the machines here, or there would be no one left to carry on the fight. As the day of the assault approached, the galaxy's combined fleet gathered in the depths of space. It was a sight unlike any other ships from a dozen species, painted in a dozen colors, all flying together under a single purpose. The humans were at the front, their battered warships leading the charge. Their voices echoed across the fleet's comms, issuing final orders and words of encouragement. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," one human captain said, his voice clear and steady. "We're fighting for every world the machines have taken, for every family that didn't get a chance to fight back. This is where we make our stand. No more running, no more hiding. This ends today." The fleet surged forward, engines blazing as they cut through the void. Ahead of them, the machine armada waited, a wall of steel and fire that stretched as far as the eye could see. The humans had called it the final stand, but in truth, it was so much more. It was a gamble with everything on the line. If they failed, there would be no one left to remember them. If they succeeded, they would give the galaxy a chance to survive. As the fleets collided, the darkness of space erupted into chaos. Explosions lit up the void like distant stars, and the comms were filled with the sounds of battle shouting, weapons firing, and ships being torn apart. The humans fought like they always did, with everything they had, holding nothing back. They led from the front, diving into the thick of the fighting, knowing that their courage would inspire the others to follow. Through the chaos, the human commanders coordinated their forces with unmatched precision, pushing toward the enemy's command structure. Every inch of ground was paid for in blood, every victory hard-won. The machines fought back with the same cold efficiency they always had, their ships swarming like locusts, relentless and overwhelming. But the humans didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Even as their ships fell one by one, even as the enemy's fire tore through their ranks, they pushed forward. They knew what was at stake. They knew there was no going back. In the heart of the battle, a massive machine flagship loomed ahead, a dark fortress surrounded by an impenetrable shield. It was the core of the invasion, the command structure that controlled the fleets. Destroying it was their only chance. The humans' voices filled the comms, rallying their forces for the final push. "We're almost there," a human captain shouted over the noise of the battle. "Keep going. Just a little further." The ship surged forward, weapons firing with everything they had left. The enemy's defenses grew fiercer, the machine ships pressing in from all sides. It was chaos, fire, and death. The humans fought at the very edge of their limits, their voices raw, their weapons overheated, their ships barely holding together. And still, they pressed on, inch by inch, toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The shield around the flagship flickered, then held. Time was running out, and the humans knew it. But they didn't falter. They didn't hesitate. They pushed harder, risking everything for one final chance. The battle was reaching its breaking point, and somewhere, in the midst of the fire and destruction, the humans made their move. The flagship's shield shimmered, flickering as the human ships poured everything they had into it. Explosions rippled across its surface, lighting up the void like flashes of lightning in a storm. The comms were chaotic, filled with overlapping voices and the hum of systems struggling to keep ships operational. A crackle cut through, the voice of a human commander steady despite the chaos. "We need more firepower on that shield. Everyone focus on the central array, that's their weak point." The humans pushed harder, their ships weaving through the machine fleet, ignoring the losses piling up around them. A coordinated volley of missiles finally struck true, and the shield fractured, rippling outward like shattered glass. For one breathless moment, the flagship's defenses dropped completely. Now, the commander roared. The fleet surged forward, every remaining weapon aimed at the exposed target. But just as the first shots pierced the flagship's hull, the machines unleashed something no one had seen before. A pulse rippled outward from the flagship, spreading in a wave of eerie light that enveloped the battlefield. Every human ship it touched shuddered violently as systems blinked and crackled. Engines sputtered, lights dimmed, and controls froze. The pulse didn't destroy them. It left them vulnerable, hanging helplessly in the void. What is that?" A pilot's voice broke through the comms, edged with panic. The answer came almost immediately as the machine fleet shifted. Smaller ships, previously idle, shot forward, darting toward the paralyzed human vessels with brutal efficiency. They struck like vultures, slicing through hulls and crippling ships one after another. "It's an EMP field," a human engineer shouted over the comms. "They've adapted, they're using it to knock us offline." A chill swept through the human forces. The machines had baited them into this moment, letting the shield collapse just long enough to spring the trap. They had known the humans would come for the flagship, and now their desperation had turned into the machines' opportunity. The ships that had fought so fiercely now drifted helplessly, like birds with broken wings. All systems rebooting. "We need time," a voice called, but time was the one thing they didn't have. The machine ships closed in fast, and explosions erupted across the battlefield. One by one, human ships were reduced to debris, breaking apart in silent fire. Those still able to move scrambled to cover their vulnerable allies, sacrificing themselves to buy precious seconds for their systems to recover. The humans weren't the only ones caught in the trap. The other species, still fighting alongside them, now realized the cost of their alliance. The machines tore through their ranks with the same efficiency, showing no mercy. For every machine destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. What had felt like a battle nearing its conclusion was now spiraling into utter disaster. In the midst of the chaos, a human ship, small and badly damaged, managed to power back online. The captain's voice broke through the comms, clear but strained. "We've got movement. Our systems are back, barely holding, but we're good to go." The humans scrambled, restarting systems and bypassing fried circuits. Ships flickered back to life, sparking and sputtering but functional enough to fight. But it wasn't enough. The machines had gained too much ground, and the flagship's weapons were now primed, unleashing waves of destruction with every second. "We can't keep this up," a human officer said, his voice thick with frustration. "There's too many of them. That pulse crippled half our fleet. We need another option." The commander's voice returned, sharp and unrelenting. "There's always another option. Find it." And then it happened. The flagship shifted, and the pulse field flickered, its glow rippling as if unstable. For a split second, the humans realized something crucial. The EMP wasn't unlimited. It was tied to the flagship itself, draining its systems to maintain the effect. If they could disrupt the core, the field would collapse entirely. "They're burning energy to hold that pulse active," a technician shouted. "We hit them hard enough, and they won't be able to sustain it. How do we get close enough to hit it?" Another voice cut in. "They've got half their fleet covering that thing." The comms went silent for a moment as the humans weighed the odds. And then a single human pilot's voice broke through calm, almost too calm. "I'll do it." The others froze. "You'll never make it, and you know it," someone said. "I know," the pilot replied. "But we don't have a choice. If I can punch through and hit that core, you can finish what I start." No one argued. They didn't have time for arguments. The pilot's ship broke away from the rest of the fleet, engines flaring as it shot toward the flagship. The machines saw the lone ship immediately, and dozens of smaller enemy craft peeled off to intercept it. But the pilot didn't slow down. They weaved through the incoming fire, pushing their ship harder than it had ever been pushed before. "You're clear. Go, go, go." A human voice called as the fleet provided covering fire, their weapons blazing to keep the machines off the pilot's back. The flagship loomed closer, its hull scorched and battered but still functional. The pilot's voice was steady as they pushed forward, ignoring the alarms screaming in their cockpit. "Almost there," they said. And then, just as they neared the core, the machine fleet adapted again. Massive turrets emerged from the flagship's hull, weapons locking onto the pilot's ship. The first volley struck, ripping apart the ship's shields and sending it spinning. But the pilot didn't stop. They stabilized the ship, flames trailing from its engines, and aimed directly at the exposed core. "Core targeted," the pilot said, their voice crackling over the comms. "All weapons armed." A second barrage of fire struck, and the ship's hull began to tear apart. The other humans could only watch, helpless, as the pilot's ship barreled toward its target. "For Earth," the pilot whispered, and then the ship's weapons fired. The screen lit up with an explosion so bright it momentarily blinded everyone watching. The flagship's core erupted, flames tearing through its hull. The EMP field flickered violently, then collapsed in a cascade of sparks. For one long moment, the battlefield fell silent as the machine fleet's movements faltered. "The field's down," someone shouted. The humans seized their chance, rallying the fleet for one last assault. But as they surged forward, ready to press the advantage, the flagship's remains began to shift. From the wreckage emerged something massive, a new form the machines had hidden until now. It was larger than anything they had ever seen, its dark shape dwarfing even the flagship. The comms crackled with stunned silence. "What is that?" a voice whispered. And then the machine's new weapon fired, and the void lit up again. The humans had disrupted the EMP, but now they faced something far worse. The machines weren't done. They had been holding back their true strength, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash it. The battlefield erupted into chaos once more, and the humans realized the fight was far from over. "All ships regroup." the commander ordered, his voice sharp. We're not finished yet. But deep down, they knew the stakes had just been raised higher than ever before. The machines were evolving, faster and deadlier than anyone had imagined, and the humans would have to find a way to survive this new nightmare. The battlefield was chaos, lit by endless streams of fire and debris drifting through space. The humans pushed forward, battered and bloodied, but unwilling to give up. Their ships, barely holding together, surged toward the monstrous form that had emerged from the wreckage of the flagship. It loomed larger than any of them had ever seen, a hulking mass of black metal and glowing cores, its presence suffocating. Weapons that dwarfed entire battleships crackled with energy, preparing to unleash devastation. Everyone, focus fire on that thing. The commander's voice rang out over the comms. This is our last chance. The remaining human ships scattered, weaving through the machine onslaught as they redirected every ounce of firepower toward the new behemoth. Lasers, missiles, and cannon rounds streaked through the void, lighting up the dark expanse as they pounded the massive structure. For a moment, it seemed to have no effect. The machine didn't flinch, its blackened surface absorbing blow after blow without pause. Then, a low hum echoed across the battlefield, followed by a ripple of light spreading out from the center of the machine. It's charging something, someone shouted. Before anyone could react, the machine released a blast that tore through space like a tidal wave. Ships, caught in its path, disintegrated instantly, their hulls dissolving into nothing. Others were thrown into spirals, losing control as the shock wave sent them hurtling backward. Report, the commander barked. The responses were grim. 30% of the fleet gone. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time, even the most hardened officers faltered, fear creeping into their voices. It's too strong, one pilot said quietly. We can't win this. But then, something unexpected happened. A small blip appeared on the sensors, coming from the edge of the battlefield. At first, no one noticed it amid the chaos. It was just one ship, tiny and insignificant compared to the enormous war machine looming before them. It wasn't even a military vessel. It was a civilian transport, its hull scorched and patched together, barely operational. Who is that? What are they doing here? An officer demanded. The comms crackled, and a voice broke through, calm and steady despite the chaos. This is Captain Liam of the Starling. I've got a cargo hold full of energy disruptors that weren't meant to see combat, but I'm making them combat-ready now. Someone's got to keep that monster distracted, right? The humans froze. It was madness, a civilian ship against a machine capable of wiping out fleets. But Liam didn't wait for permission. The Starling accelerated, engines flaring as it headed straight for the behemoth, swerving between machine drones that tried to intercept it. The ship had no weapons, no shields, and barely any speed to escape. But Liam didn't need any of those. What's his plan? Someone whispered. The realization hit almost immediately. The energy disruptors and unstable technology still in testing were built to overload electrical systems, not for war. If Liam could get close enough to the machine, the disruptors might destabilize its core. Liam, that's suicide, the commander said harshly. Turn back. We'll find another way. There isn't another way, Liam replied softly. You all have to finish this. If I can give you that chance, it'll be worth it. The Starling pushed forward, weaving through heavy fire. Machine drones swarmed around it, trying to stop its advance, but the other humans realized what was happening. They surged into action, throwing themselves into the fight to give Liam cover. Ships fired on the drones relentlessly, drawing their attention away. "Keep him clear. Cover that ship," the commander shouted, his voice raw. The Starling took hit after hit, sparks flying as pieces of its hull broke away, but it kept going. Alarms screamed inside the ship, but Liam's hands remained steady on the controls. Ahead, the behemoth's core pulsed with light, a beating heart of energy that powered the entire monstrosity. Liam pushed the engines to their limit, the ship shuddering violently under the strain. "You're almost there," a voice said softly over the comms. "Keep going." The Starling slammed through the final line of defense, drones scattering in its wake. The machine's core glowed brighter as it detected the threat, weapons charging to annihilate the tiny ship. Liam activated the disruptors, his voice coming through the comms one last time. "For everyone." The Starling collided with the machine's core, and for an instant, time seemed to freeze. Then, a blinding light erupted, spreading out in a shockwave that engulfed the entire battlefield. Human ships shielded their sensors, systems flickering as the energy pulse swept over them. The machine drones faltered, their movements slowing, then freezing entirely. The massive behemoth shuddered, its surface cracking as the energy destabilized it from within. The light faded, and for a moment, silence reigned. The behemoth drifted in space, dark and lifeless, its enormous form breaking apart. The machine fleet followed suit, drones collapsing into silence as their systems shut down one by one. The humans stared, stunned, as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. "We did it," someone whispered. Cheers erupted across the comms, voices overlapping in disbelief and joy. The machine's unstoppable force had been defeated, but at a cost. The Starling was gone, and with it, the man who had given everything to ensure humanity's survival. The remaining human ships regrouped, drifting through the debris-strewn battlefield. The victory felt strange, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and grief. They had won, but the price had been steep. Then, as the humans began to assess the damage, a faint signal appeared on their sensors. It was small, almost insignificant, but it was there, a pulse, like a heartbeat coming from the edge of the wreckage. The comms crackled, and a faint voice cut through the static. "Anyone out there?" The humans froze. The voice was weak, but unmistakably human. The signal traced back to a small escape pod drifting through the wreckage. It had barely survived the explosion, its systems fried and oxygen dwindling. Commander's voice broke through, filled with disbelief. "Liam?" A soft laugh came through the comms. "Told you I'd give you a shot." The cheers returned, louder this time, as ships scrambled to recover the escape pod. The machines were defeated, their fleet silenced, and against impossible odds, humanity had survived. Liam's sacrifice and his miraculous survival became a story that would be told for generations. As the remaining human fleet drifted back towards safer territory, the stars seemed a little brighter. The machines had been stronger, faster, and smarter, but in the end, it wasn't strength or speed that won. It was human resolve, the refusal to surrender, and the willingness to sacrifice for something greater. The machines may have believed they were unbeatable, but they had underestimated the one thing they couldn't replicate: the spirit of humanity. "Set course for home," the commander said, his voice steady. "We've earned it." Among the debris, they recovered fragments of data, encrypted messages, schematics, and strange energy signatures that pointed to something larger. The behemoth they had destroyed was not an isolated weapon. It was part of a network, a hive mind, stretching far beyond their known sector of space. And while they had stopped this wave, it was clear the machine's creators were still out there, watching, waiting. "We don't have time to celebrate," one admiral said during a council meeting. "This was a victory, yes, but we need to prepare. We don't know when or where they'll strike next." Liam sat in the back of the meeting, still recovering but unwilling to stay idle. He had been quiet since returning, more thoughtful than before. When the meeting ended, he found himself staring out of a viewport, watching the distant stars. The commander joined him, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "You're worried," the commander said. Liam nodded. "We beat them this time, but what about the next? They're smarter than us, faster. If they come back stronger, what do we do then?" The commander folded his arms, his gaze fixed on the stars. "We do what we always do. We adapt. We fight. And if we have to, we sacrifice." He looked at Liam. "You showed everyone what it means to be human, Liam. The machines don't understand that. They don't know what it means to have hope, to believe in something bigger than themselves. That's our strength, and it always will be." Liam took a deep breath, letting the words settle. The machines had underestimated humanity once. Maybe, just maybe, they could do it again. But they would need to be ready. This victory had bought them time, nothing more. Over the next year, humanity threw everything it had into rebuilding. New ships were constructed stronger, faster, equipped with better weapons and shields. Scientists worked day and night, reverse engineering the machine's technology to better understand their enemy. Fleets trained relentlessly, preparing for the next battle. The lesson had been learned. Survival wasn't enough anymore. They had to be ready to fight, to defend not just their homes, but the future of their species. Liam found himself back in space, at the helm of a new ship. It wasn't the Starling. Nothing could replace that old vessel. But this ship, christened the Resolute, carried the same spirit. Liam's crew were hand-picked men and women who had fought in the battle, who knew what was at stake. Together, they patrolled the outer edges of known space, scanning for any sign of the machine's return. There were moments of quiet beauty in the void, the glow of distant nebulae, the serene silence of a galaxy untouched. But there were also reminders of what had been lost. Wreckage still drifted in forgotten corners of space, a silent testament to those who had given everything. Liam often thought of them, the countless faces he would never see again, the sacrifices that had made this fragile peace possible. And then, one day, the silence broke. The Resolute picked up an unusual signal coming from deep space. It was faint, barely noticeable against the background noise of the galaxy. But it was there, repeating like a heartbeat. Liam stood at the sensor station, staring at the data with a sinking feeling in his chest. "What is it?" his second-in-command asked quietly. Liam didn't answer right away. He knew what it was, even if he didn't want to admit it. The machines were stirring again. This signal, it wasn't random. It was deliberate, a message sent across the void. The hive mind was awake, and it was reaching out. "They're coming back," Liam said finally, his voice steady. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no panic. They had known this day would come. Liam turned to his communications officer. "Send word to command. Tell them we've got a signal. And prepare the fleet. It's starting again." As the message was relayed, Liam sat back in his chair, his hands resting on the controls. He thought about Earth, about the people who were counting on them to hold the line. He thought about the sacrifices that had been made, the victories they had earned. The machines were relentless, but so was humanity. And if this was the start of another war, then so be it. They would face it the same way they always had, together. The Resolute turned toward the source of the signal, its engines flaring as it prepared to dive into the unknown. Out there, in the darkness, the machines were waiting. But humanity was ready. They had proven it once, and they would prove it again. For the first time in a long while, Liam smiled. The odds didn't matter. The machines could bring their armies, their weapons, their technology. They could bring everything they had. Because in the end, the machines could never understand the one thing that made humanity different. They would always fight for each other. And as long as they had that, they would never stop winning.